United States, the US midterm polls are, as we speak, coming to a close across several states in the United States. They're underway. Millions of people across the United States have been casting their votes over the last few hours. Now, with billions of dollars already spent on the campaign, the big question is the control of the Congress. That has the House of Representatives and the Senate. All 435 seats in the House of the Representatives are up for grabs. According to early predictions, the Republicans seem to have a safe majority there. We are going to check in about the numbers in just a little while. When it comes to the Senate, in the Senate, there are 35 seats up for grabs. And according to experts and poll predictions, that is going to be a toss-up. Now, it's particularly important to see who wins these elections, because these elections decide also the fate of Joe Biden, President Joe Biden's remaining 2 years in office. Will he be able to pass the bills he wants? Part of those decisions will be happening right now. That's the story that we're covering over the next few minutes. And that's the story we're going to be connecting with multiple ground reporters about through the rest of the day. Now, we have Isabel Rosales. She's with us live from Washington, D.C. She's going to be bringing us our ground report today. Isabel, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Isabel, I'd like to understand from you, early numbers, I believe, coming in. What are they telling us?
Right. And I can tell you that we have the pre-election numbers, right? 45 million ballots that have been cast before Election Day. Those numbers are ahead of 2018, but below the 2020 presidential election, which is normal. Usually during a presidential election year, you have a lot more people turning out and putting in their votes. So the term election night, Toya, can be a bit misleading, right? Because it would suggest that after the night is over, you would get those results instantly, but it is a lot more complex than that and a lot more nuanced. A better term would be election week or perhaps election month. Those nuances change by the state, they change by the county. It has to do when the polls close. It has to do when those mail-in ballots are counted. And also has to do with the different state rules. Like over in Pennsylvania and Michigan, they have banned early counting of mail-in ballots. So in Pennsylvania, Election Day votes, those lean more Republican, and traditionally those are counted first. Then are the mail-in ballots that they are counted, they lean Democratic. So that would suggest that perhaps we could see what's called a red mirage, that it seems like the Republicans are pulling ahead at first until those mail-in ballots are counted. And Arizona, the opposite of that is true. Those mail-in ballots are processed a lot quicker. They're counted as soon as they're received. So they're some of them the first to be received. So it can be a complicated process to determine who the clear winner is. When that full picture is formed, it could take days, it could take weeks even. Toya.
Isabel, could I ask you over here, I know that there were multiple early reports saying that it was possible that this time the voter turnout for midterm elections could be historic. Do we have any data over there about that?
Yeah, and Toya, I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of problem hearing you. But if you're asking about what sort of issues are driving voters to the polls, I do have a little bit of insight about that. Certainly, Democrats have an uphill battle here. In order to not lose seats, they essentially have to defy historical trends, right? Normally, we see this sort of backlash of whatever party's in charge of the presidency, voters come in by the droves and demand change. And Republicans have several obvious advantages, including the issue, what is at the top of the voters' mind, which we asked lightly voters what they care about, what's driving them to the polls. And this was fascinating. They said that the economy, inflation, that is at the top of the list overwhelmingly. 51% of voters said that that is the issue that they care about. And that could be bad news for Democrats because they have to answer for that. There could be a souring of relations there that the voters take out on them because Democrats have control of both chambers of Congress and the presidency. Now, Democrats would say there's only so much that they can do to curb inflation, to curb higher gas prices. But this is clearly, Toya, an issue that resonates with voters, and they will have the final word.
Okay, Isabel, I want to ask you one more question over here. Could you just explain to our audiences what the impact of these results? I know there are a few possible combinations here. as to who could win the Senate and who could win the House of Representatives. But could you tell us what the impact of today's decisions will be on the 2 years remaining in the president's term and on the elections in 2024, possibly?
Yeah, the impacts. I got you there. Okay, so President Biden is obviously projecting optimism. He feels confident that they can keep majority in the House and the Senate. But his team behind the scenes are bracing for losses. Biden said at a rally, quote, "If we lose the House and the Senate, it's going to be a horrible 2 years." And according to our sources, his advisors are privately acknowledging that they just do not have a path forward for maintaining majority of the House. This midterm, it's really a report card. Voters are going to get a chance to grade the president, his policies, and his parties. So if Republicans take control of either chamber or both chambers, it really is a dooming of Democratic priorities, things like climate change, abortion access, voting rights. Also on the chopping block could be a rollback of certain legislation of Biden's recent legislation, like billions of dollars that have been set aside to boost up the Internal Revenue Service. That could be at risk there. Also, the stream of money going into Ukraine. We recently had an exclusive interview with House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, who said that money will still be going to Ukraine, but he says that they will not be writing, quote, blank checks. Plus, McCarthy also left the door open to launching eventual impeachment proceedings, something that many of his members have asked publicly for him to do.
And lastly, Isabel, could we ask you quickly about voter turnout? I know that, again, early predictions were saying that this time we could see record-breaking numbers. Do you have any data on that yet?
Yeah, and as I mentioned, 45 million people pre-election that have casted their ballots. Again, this is superior to what we saw in 2018, but again, falling short of 2020. We've seen more young voters that have showed up, but they're still not outpacing older boomer generation voters. In Georgia especially, we saw more black voters coming out, but it's difficult and it's dangerous to also assign what does that mean, right? Which party will benefit from that? We're going to have to wait here in the coming days to see what the voters decided and do a post-mortem, so to say, and see which party came out ahead. Toya.
Isabel Rosales, thank you so much for joining us here on our show. For our audience